So, when I started this channel, the whole idea was for me to talk about things that mainstream media would not share and to provide you actual analysis of what's going on behind the scenes, not just the agenda and the messages that are being spewed from either side. I feel it's a good opportunity right now to do it with gas prices. Everybody's talking about gas prices, and there's two types of narratives you keep hearing. Number one, it's either Putin's fault or it's Chevron slash ExxonMobil's fault. Biden just came out and said, well, the oil companies are making too much money. They're just greedy, they're pigs. On the other hand, there's a whole different discussion which you hear right now, which is that this is Biden's fault. Biden caused this to happen, and that's why he needs to pay the price, etc., etc., etc. So everybody have an agenda, and they're trying to push it using gas prices because everybody gets riled about gas prices. Rightfully so. I mean, we should be paying $5 a gallon, my guy. That's a whole different discussion. So I'm here to clear up everything and just explain what the hell is going on. Both sides are actually lying to you. And let me tell you clearly right now, this isn't Biden's fault, and I'm not a Biden fan. This isn't Putin's fault. Clearly, I'm not a Putin fan. That's been already established, I think. And this is not, almost kind of in a funny manner, not even ExxonMobil's or Chevron's fault. In fact, this is not even inflation's fault. Why? Tom, are you off your rocker? If this is not inflation, if this is not Putin, if this is not the greed of ExxonMobil and Chevron, if this is neither of these things, if it's not Biden's fault, so whose fault it is? Let me explain. So here's how this thing played out. Over the past few years, governments across the world, not just in the US, across the world, mainly in Western Europe and North America, went really ham on ESG, renewable energy, sustainability, etc., etc., etc. The most hawkish or dovish, whatever you want to call them, were the Germans, who actually decided to shut down coal plants and nuclear energy plants and basically go all in on Russian gas because this was the most environmentally friendly option. The same thing in the US. And to be honest, this has been going on for quite a few years. I mean, sustainably, quite a few years. So over the past few years, as this whole trend of basically, let's kill the oil companies, let's kill the fossil energy, blah, 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 let's go for green. So basically what happened the past few years, as people were pushing for it, there's been a lot of wishful thinking. And as this wishful thinking actually came about, the narratives have become more of kind of what we want the world to be, which is full of sustainable energy, green energy for sure, and not what the world is. Now, as long as you didn't have the pandemic, as long as you don't have a war in Europe, as long as you don't have supply chain shortages because of closed down facilities and logistics chains being completely fucked, you can somehow manage, even with this whole kind of agenda of going balls deep into renewable energy, when in fact it is way ahead of its time right now. There's probably 5 to 10 years, and being super generous, until we can actually make a dent with renewable energy. It's just not there. So we bet on this thing way before it was too ready. And essentially what happened is that, Murphy's Law raised its ugly head and said, well, now I'm going to throw a monkey wrench into this whole machine that barely is holding on, and I'm going to fuck shit up. I'm going to start a pandemic, going to start a war, going to start inflation, etc., etc., etc. So that's number one. Now, number two, you have to understand that, again, I'm not saying that this is Biden's fault, but also when Biden says that this is ExxonMobil's fault or Chevron's fault, he's also full of shit. Let me explain why. So over the past, I want to say, almost 2 decades, the US governments, whether it's Democratic governments, Republican governments, every single US government, US regulator, US officials have been bashing the oil companies, trying to destroy them pretty much. Going hard on this renewable energy, absolutely discouraging development of new activities, making it pretty much impossible for these companies to invest capex into increasing capacity. And it's been well documented. It's not this government, it's not the previous government, it's been kind of the last few governments basically making this push. Now, when you have the government basically fighting against you and against your industry, you're not going to invest capex, which is capital expenditures, into something that's going to take 5 years to get actually money out, because in those 5 years, things can really go south. So as now the oil companies are actually making good money for the first time in many years, now the government is saying, well, why aren't you investing more money in increasing capacity? Because look at the interview that the Chevron CEO gave just a few days ago. He said, hey, I don't think we're ever going to have a refinery in the US ever again. The reason he's saying that is because there's just not enough stability. I mean, if this government right now needs oil because of Russia, Ukraine, what happens when they don't need it as much in a few months? They're going to shellac the oil companies again. So if that's the case, if that's kind of the Mexican standoff, then they'd just rather, max out profits right now, get as much cash as they can, and not help this government, because they know at the end, this government, the next government, whatever government is going to come, might just absolutely go at them again. So we have kind of the unwillingness of oil companies to invest in increasing capacity because of how governments have behaved the past few years. And on top of that, we have supply chain shortages, which were caused by the pandemic and the complete rise in demand because of the reopening, the summer, and we just removed Russia from the supplier list for the US and Western Europe. That's like 10% of the supply. This whole combination is what's creating this. This is not Biden's fault or Chevron's fault or Putin's fault. This is what happens when you play stupid games. You win stupid prizes, motherfucker. It's that simple. You play stupid games, you bet on this ESG scam bullshit, and now we're paying the price. So I think that if you want to find responsible parties to this, I guess this would be the people who were pushing hard in the boardrooms, in the regulators, in the decision-making offices to go for ESG, to go for renewables, and not sustain a strategic ability to actually produce oil and energy in the US without relying on fairy godmothers coming in and sprinkling energy dust over your, over your shit when you need it. This is not how the world works. Hopefully now there's a change in policy and a change that will actually encourage the oil companies to increase capacity. But I wouldn't hold my breath, at least not now. Let's see how this thing plays out. As always, this is for the few people who are actually willing to watch these car videos. Thank you for stopping by. I'll see you in the next video.